Now, certainly there were Raiders fans that were excited about the return of Chucky, John Gruden himself, to the sideline for the Oakland Raiders after 9 years in the Monday Night Football broadcasting booth. Part of it was nostalgia. When you talk about the last really successful head coach of any note for the Oakland Raiders organization was John Gruden. That's going back almost 2 decades. And kind of the thought of completing the circle, if you will, making up for one of Al Davis's great mistakes, if you will. The bottom line was, especially with the commitment that the organization had made to John Gruden, that he was going to be there for the long haul, and Raiders fans were excited about it. They felt like, hey, this is a big-time move that a big-time organization would make. Apparently not remembering that most of John Gruden's tenure in Tampa Bay was disappointing. The lack of player development was striking, and in particular, the lack of ability and desire to develop quarterbacks was astounding. And then you get into 2018, and you kind of could see why there would be some concerns about John Gruden before the season even started. You're trading off Khalil Mack, your best player, and you're trading him off. You would think Khalil Mack would be one of the reasons you'd want to take the job, because you'd want to have Khalil Mack playing for you. Then you go off and trade him. And sure, you got a bounty of picks from the Bears, but you misjudged things thinking that trading Khalil Mack to the Bears wouldn't have a significant impact on them, thinking that you would end up with a top 20 first-round pick in 2019 from them. Just kind of shows just how disconnected from reality John Gruden was and how ridiculous it was to not only bring him in as a head coach, but give him all this personnel decision-making power when he had been removed from the game as a coach, as a decision-maker for so long. Sure, he'd been in touch with the game somewhat with his John Gruden quarterback camp and all that other crap and his work he did on Monday Night Football, but let's be real. Being in the trenches as a head coach every day is an entirely different ballgame. And you just come in and you're basically saying, yep, we're going to tear this thing down. I'm not saying that the Raiders didn't need to tear it down. They did. But what's really puzzling about it is you trade away Khalil Mack. Then during the season, you trade away Amari Cooper, setting yourself up potentially really nicely for the 2019 draft. But you keep Derek Carr. You keep a middling NFL quarterback, pay him big money when you are clearly trying to tank and rebuild. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And you look at things like last year, trading away a third-round pick for Martavis Bryant, who really didn't do crap for the organization. Just not a good start for John Gruden as the head man for the Oakland Raiders. Then comes the offseason, and in comes Mike Mayock as the new general manager, even though John Gruden effectively is his boss. Out is Reggie McKenzie, and yeah, this ought to be fun. You look at the offseason, not surprisingly, John Gruden loves his veterans. He went out and spent a bunch of money in free agency. Trent Brown, Tyrell Williams, J.J. Nelson, Vontez Burfict, LaMarcus Joyner, Corey Liuget. Don't get me wrong, the Raiders had a lot of holes. And even if they had kept Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, they still had a lot of holes. They still were not a good football team. That is one potential justification of this, is that you weren't going to be a good football team with Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper anyway, so why not trade them, get the most you can in return? Second part of that is you need to make sure that you capitalize on the draft pick currency that you receive from the Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper deals, and the jury is still out on what ultimately the Raiders will get in return for this. But they made a lot of moves, and obviously they were in a big position of power come the draft. It was really quite surprising, though, that they didn't do a whole lot of maneuvering up and down the board. They stayed put with each of their 3 first-round picks, which to me felt like a little bit of a mistake. I could understand what Mayock was going for here, but Cleveland Farrell was a reach at number 4. I'm sorry, he was. Joshua Jacobs made sense to me. Jonathan Abram made some sense to me at the end of round 1. But I was surprised they didn't try to move up a little bit or move down and get additional picks, because the fact is they needed a lot of picks. They needed a lot of help because this is not a very good, not a very deep team at all. Like I said, with the rest of what they did in the draft with Trayvon Mullen, Moreau, Hunter Renfrow, you could tell there was a bit of a Mayock influence here, where last year you're talking about Colton Miller and P.J. Hall being the first 2 picks, just head-scratching, like, what the hell are you doing? I could at least say, even if you question some of the players taken, I can see the approach and the philosophy, wanting to bring in guys that were winners, high-character type of guys in terms of your draft picks. That makes sense. which runs counterculture to the whole thing of why they ever went after Antonio Brown in the first place. Now, look, I will always defend the Raiders on this. You had the chance to get an elite wide receiver in the peak of his career on 2 reasonable contract years, about $15 million in guaranteed money per, for a 3rd and 5th round pick. It's going to be easy to say just how bad of a trade that was. But in the grand scheme of things, how many teams and even good organizations have a 3rd and 5th round pick every year and don't get shit out of those guys? You swung for the fences, not having to throw a lot of your best stuff up there at the plate in order to get a future Hall of Fame level player like Antonio Brown. You have to do that. But when it comes to the way this whole saga played out with Antonio Brown, this escalated so quickly. The cryotherapy, I'm freezing my feet off crap, the helmet saga, the cussing out Mike Mayock and calling him a cracker, the tearful apology, then posting stuff on YouTube featuring a recorded conversation with him and John Gruden, never mind the potential impacts of being in the state of California and 2-party consent call recording laws, but well, whatever. And then basically asking and begging for the Raiders to release you and then celebrating when they did. Like one of the weirdest scenarios I've seen in the NFL in a long time. I'm not going to say it's the weirdest because there's a lot of stuff that's weird about the NFL. And we've seen some really, really weird crap over the years. But this is one of them. This is absolutely one of them. And now you look at it, the Raiders basically gave up a 3rd and 5th round pick to be the layover to help Antonio Brown get the connecting flight to where the hell he wanted to go to begin with, which was New England. That makes a lot of sense. Doesn't leave you with a lot of hope and optimism for this year, does it, Raiders fans? I mean, what do you really have to be excited about or really look forward to? In terms of your receiving unit, now you don't have Antonio Brown. What do you really have? You've still got Colton Miller, apparently, protecting Derek Carr's blind side. I can't imagine how that's going to go well. Ugh. Your pass rush. You sit there and talk about trading Khalil Mack and your defense wasn't any good with him. Well, they certainly weren't good without him. And they had about as many sacks as an entire team as Khalil Mack did as one guy for the Chicago Bears. And where the hell do you get the pass rush now? Now, maybe you're hoping Farrell will provide some of that. Maybe you're hoping that Hurst on the interior will provide some of that. Maybe you're hoping Arden Key will provide more than one of those sacks. I don't know. But by God, is there any real reason for hope or optimism with this shit show in Oakland? And you're about ready to move to Las Vegas? I mean this really. It's not just a bag on the Raiders here. But what reason do you really have to be positive or optimistic about this? What makes you think that Mayock knows what the hell he's doing? Even though, like I said, I didn't mind his draft that much. But more importantly, what the hell makes you think that John Gruden knows what the hell he's doing? And the way this whole thing played out with Antonio Brown, knowing that John Gruden's in charge, makes me realize just how poorly John Gruden handled the situation, kind of left his GM to flow in the breeze because, you can't do that to the general manager. We're going to have to suspend you. But no, he's playing Monday night. But then we're going to cut him. What the hell's going on here? That's enough about the Raiders. If they win more than 4 games this year, it's a miracle. They're a joke and a train wreck, and everybody damn good and well knows it.